In 1993, a bank robbery in Santo Domingo was so wild that it took the country by storm. Captured on live television, it would be broadcast to the masses and forever change the banking system in Santo Domingo. A father of two girls would turn into a clown-faced perpetrator and shock the entire nation with his actions. Join us as we have a look at the most terrifying bank robbery caught on television in Santo Domingo. The background. The tranquility of Santo Domingo was disturbed in 1993 when the Banco del Progreso became the focal point of an incredible heist that was televised by various media networks. A robbery was being staged by a man wearing a clown mask who was holding a dozen hostages. Initially motivated by the intention to rob the vault and flee with his loot, the scenario took an unexpected set of detours when employees at another branch of the bank were alerted to what was happening. In the midst of the chaos, the authorities would be informed, which would ignite a 12-hour standoff of negotiations and theatrics, and would all be shown on live national television. The broadcast event became an iconic moment in the Dominican Republic's communal memory, a story in which reality trumped fantasy, and the clown-masked man was not only a criminal, but also turned into an unexpected personal tragedy. The robber's identity. Investigating the man hidden beneath the clown mask reveals Cristobal Rodriguez, a 42-year-old plastic surgeon. Rodriguez had fallen into financial troubles and was desperate for relief. And despite his work and home life, the weight of financial difficulties and the need to provide for his wife and children had driven him into a desperate course of action. His wife, who worked as the human resources manager at the bank's main branch, had unwittingly played a key role in her husband's criminal scheme. He had planned to carry out the crime at a branch in Santo Domingo in order to avoid any suspicion or obstacles. Using insider knowledge that was provided by his wife, he methodically planned the theft, discovering the location of the money and selecting the best time to carry out his plan. Cristobal had obtained a clown mask to cover his identity during his actions. A benign carnival item became the symbol of approaching catastrophe. The story takes an unsettling turn as the community faces the paradox of a man beloved by his professional life who turned to criminal activity. His actions, driven by economic desperation, converted the ordinary into the extraordinary, leaving an unforgettable impact on Santo Domingo's collective consciousness. Preparation. Rodriguez had found himself tangled in a web of decisions that would forever alter the course of history in the Santo Domingo banking system. In a severe need to support his family, he made the drastic decision to rob a bank. Surprisingly, his wife had unwittingly played a role in the conception of his theft. With intimate knowledge, he methodically planned out the bank's layout, finding the location of the vault, and selecting the best time for his daring venture. To prepare, he purchased a simple clown mask to use in concealing his identity, a seemingly harmless carnival decoration that would soon become an emblem of dread. The mask had two functions: to disguise his identity and signify the approaching terror that would engulf the nation. His next purchase would be a firearm which had been obtained by illegal means, and he then loaded up a bag with several meters of rope, wire, and a bottle of pre-poured gasoline, along with a knife and more ammunition for his weapon. The day would come for the heist, and at 2 p.m. he entered the bank as a regular customer. In his first contact with an employee, he quietly expressed his desire to discuss tax credit issues with the bank's manager. This seemingly innocuous exchange was the prelude to his actions of criminality. An unexpected change of events occurred, though, as he awaited for the arrival of the manager, and a call from the bank's main offices would set in motion a chain of events that would result in mayhem. Nobody expected the perpetrator of the approaching disaster to be a family man, a revelation that would send shockwaves across the country. The Santo Domingo bank robbery was about to defy all expectations and send an entire country into both shock and bewilderment. Woman activates alarm. A woman working at the bank's main offices had found herself unknowingly thrown into a dangerous situation. Once the robbery began, she immediately activated the silent alarm, reaching the police on the other end of the connection. Her actions unfolded in concert with the commotion in the bank, Dropping to the ground, she kept a link with another branch in order to assist with authorities and the ongoing events taking place within the bank. Meanwhile, Rodriguez had successfully subdued 12 hostages, who included both customers and bank officials, ordering them to lie down on the floor in an attempt to have total control over the situation. He then quizzed an employee regarding the location of the money, but upon getting to the safe, his hopes would be crushed to discover there was no money. Unbeknownst to him, the bank's cash supplies were only refilled during substantial inter-branch money transactions on specified days and hours. Undaunted, the man in the mask was able to secure a modest sum of 3,000 Dominican pesos in cash, as well as a 10,000 peso check and 2 gold rings that belonged to the bank's manager. In the larger scope of things, this would amount to around $1,000, a small pittance that fell well short of his expected windfall. The gap between expectation and reality would provide a striking picture of a precisely planned heist gone awry, entangling both the criminal and the hostages in an unpredictable and chaotic series of events. The police arrive. Cristobal took all the people present in the bank as prisoners and barricaded himself inside. Meanwhile, news agencies and leading journalists would begin to cover the situation that was taking place within the bank. The police had begun planning for the operation that would have them working long hours to assure the safety of the hostages. Several officers took positions that surrounded the bank, including up to 4 snipers who had positioned themselves nearby to establish an angle from which they could target the robber if the order was to be given. However, owing to a lack of professionalism, things would quickly go south, and soon the situation degenerated into a bloodbath. Rodriguez began to lose patience despite his facade hiding his emotions. The arrival of the police had not been planned, and now he had to deal with the hostage scenario that he had manufactured himself. He began to look for a way out of the bank without revealing his identity, and soon police would ring the phone inside of the bank. Negotiations began to secure the captive's release, and Cristobal expressed his requests in this first conversation, which were pretty unreasonable. He wanted the authorities to send a helicopter to facilitate an uninterrupted escape, and he wanted to take 2 hostages with him to ensure that he could leave the nation freely and without revealing his face or name. The police would not accept this, though, and the captain offered the best bargain he could make. Cristobal could leave the building in the automobile of the bank manager. However, this was conditional, relying on the fact that the people in the bank, the hostages, would not be hurt. Cristobal never removed his mask and spoke in a high-pitched voice that was definitely not his own. It meant that he always sounded strange and added to the mystery around his identity. This was, of course, in an attempt to make his voice not recognizable if someone happened to be recording the calls. It's how he negotiated until they came to an agreement. Negotiations. Cristobal had agreed to temporarily free one of the captives in order to retrieve the keys to the getaway car. He insisted that the hostage return with the keys because he didn't trust anyone approaching the bank or entering through the door, fearing an assault from the police. He further stated that if anything went wrong, he would not hesitate to attack and injure anyone within the bank. It was at that point the case made headlines all across news outlets, and every Dominican was watching to see how the hostage situation and the negotiations would unfold. Thanks to a large number of reporters who gathered outside, real-time updates were received. The captain made his first blunder in the entire operation hours after Cristobal had entered the bank. Negotiations had been going well, but after being apprised of the situation, the governor approved providing safe passage, allowing the disguised man to exit the bank without police involvement. The captain, on the other hand, would disintegrate under the pressures, and when the hostage was released to retrieve the automobile's keys, instead of turning the keys over, the man hurriedly rescued her, rushing her to the opposite sidewalk, violating the agreement with Cristobal. This decision would later be viewed as a critical miscalculation and a turning point in the case, and as a result, the individuals who were trapped inside became frantic and skeptical. Cristobal, still with his mask on, had distanced himself from the bank's entrance, disappearing from the view of police while severing all communication with officers in the following hours. He then continued to barricade himself inside with the remaining hostages in the bank. To express his discontent with the negotiation results, he sent a letter to authorities informing them that if they did not comply with his demands, he would set the entire bank on fire. He also felt that he had been slighted and deceived, and that the captain was not worth trusting. Everything about his letter indicated he would become increasingly aggressive, and he felt completely cornered. This was confirmed when he realized that the police had not changed their plans after reading his first letter. The second letter. Cristobal chose to write another letter where this time it was in his own handwriting in order to heighten the sense of fear. The contents of the communication, addressed to the president and a newspaper that was reporting on the events, was even more threatening than before. The horrific aspect of the incident was intensified when the journalist bravely read the letter out loud. Once again, Cristobal made the threat to burn the bank down if there was any disobedience to his demands. Within the letter, he claimed that he had 5 other armed men inside with him, and that he would set everything and everyone on fire if his demands were not met. He also makes references to God and that God will help them, and that everything will be all right in the end, and that the police officer's actions will be the determining factor. TV presenter calls. As the hours ticked on, the reality of the situation would show no signs of improving, and in the midst of the tense atmosphere, a television presenter and producer would take center stage. Broadcasting live on television, he became a pivotal player in the unfolding drama, and he dialed the bank's phone number during the live broadcast. To his surprise, the masked man on the other end of the line would answer, agreeing to engage in a conversation. This would mark a historic and unsettling moment that would forever be etched in the collective memory of the Dominican society as one of the most disturbing incidents ever. A hostage on the line would tell the presenter that there was someone positioned in front of the glass and that they would soon be witnessing a shooting on live television. The conversation then moves on to the presenter trying to reason with both the criminal and the hostages, trying to keep them calm, while also trying to negotiate the situation into a peaceful resolution. Journalist helps. After realizing the mental instability of the man, the presenter decides to cut the live broadcast and focus on finding a way to approach the bank. He came up with the idea of offering himself as a hostage in exchange for the 2 girls with whom the criminal had originally planned to escape. He believed that talking to Cristobal in person could help him to understand the madness he was committing, and he even intended to disarm him once he was within reach, convincing him that it was not a police ploy. He reached the bank around 7 in the evening, but his brother, a psychiatrist, had convinced him not to go in with the plan, explaining that he wouldn't survive the attack. He exchanged places with the presenter and informed both him and the authorities that the actions of the kidnapper indicated that he was not only an ordinary criminal, but a psychopath or perhaps a sociopath capable of extreme measures. Although the presenter did not become a hostage in the scenario, another person stepped forward to intervene in the negotiations. A journalist spoke with Cristobal over the phone and agreed to enter the bank as a new hostage and negotiator. The man in the mask had refused to engage in a dialogue with the police for hours due to the distrust that he had developed, and thus they entered the bank after 8 in the evening. The interior was dark because Cristobal had instructed a bank employee to turn off all the lights. Before the chaos. In the dark of the evening, authorities would be forced to set up a generator with 5 large spotlights that were aimed at the entrance, and from inside, Rodriguez had ordered the journalist to enter through the main door. Rodriguez led him to the bank's reception, instructing one of the female hostages to search and then drench him in gasoline from head to toe, as he had done with all of the others. Initially, the negotiations between the two did not seem to be going well. Inside, the police doubted the man's ability to convince Rodriguez to surrender without harming the hostages. The journalist insisted that they respect the original request, claiming that he would not harm anyone else and would only escape in the manager's car, taking the journalist and 2 women as a guarantee. He had promised to leave the remaining hostages unharmed inside of the bank. Finally, around 1 a.m., after more than 12 hours inside, Cristobal and the police would reach an agreement. Rodriguez had proposed to exit with 2 women tied at his side, using them as human shields. The journalist was not tied because he was supposed to be the getaway driver, and it seemed as though a peaceful deal would be leaving both parties satisfied. However, no one had any inkling of the chaos that was about to unfold. The first shot. Out of nowhere and without warning, a shot rang out, triggering everything. Police sniper hidden on a balcony above the bank had decided to take action on his own in an attempt to relieve the situation. Within his actions, he would ruin the entire operation by defying the order not to shoot. Instead of hitting Cristobal, the bullet struck the right shoulder of the bank's manager, exiting out of the back of her arm, and the single shot would unleash chaos in place. Upon hearing the gunshot, Cristobal crouched and immediately took cover behind the journalist, firing indiscriminately at police who were in front of the bank. They then responded with several more shots until a ceasefire order had been given. And fortunately, amidst all of the chaos, the journalist had managed to run to the side of the bank and was intercepted by the police. However, the manager received 2 more shots that brought her down to the ground. Her vital organs, though, were spared. The other woman, however, would not have the same luck. As she tried to flee and run for safety, she took several shots to her body and fell to the ground, which ended her life. The sniper had sabotaged the entire operation by disobeying orders not to shoot. One overconfident decision by a police officer had led to the untimely demise of a woman and the injuries of several others. Remembering Celeste Paulino. Celeste Paulino was engaged to be married to a young man who worked at the bank. The wedding was only 10 days away. This became the most disputed element of the case, with many claiming that the gunshot that took her life had belonged to the police. Despite the journalist and authorities' claim against Cristobal, the physics of the circumstance made it implausible that a bullet from the man in the clown mask would have hit her in that way. Furthermore, because she was so close to Cristobal, gunshot residue would have been present on her face. However, during an interview, the forensic expert who first evaluated her declared that no additional examinations could be undertaken. Surprisingly, her family chose not to provide any information to the media, refusing to allow an autopsy. And in fact, despite multiple errors, they rushed to the burial. Many officers were able to hit Rodriguez with their bullets, but he took advantage of the situation and sneaked back into the bank, leaving a trail of blood. After taking cover behind the counter, he did not realize that police officers were inside the bank with him, and they took him by surprise, firing 2 straight shots into him. Following the gunfire, an officer's reassuring words would echo out that the man was dead. Upon entering, it would be discovered that he had died on the spot. As they were dragging the now-deceased man's body away, a woman stepped up saying that she knew him and knew who he was. When asked if this was correct, she replied yes, and informed them of his name, and apparently the two were work colleagues. Following the discovery, they called his wife, who would later confirm the body's identity. In subsequent interviews, his wife would reveal that their 2 children had recognized the mask that he was wearing on television since they had seen him wearing it on another occasion. And despite the disclosures, a surprising number of people came forward to defend his behavior, claiming that he was simply looking for money to build a better life for his family. The evidence would reveal that he had actually had an affair, as a suitcase containing his passport and that of an alleged girlfriend would be discovered in his office later during the investigation. His case, which forever altered Dominican police security regulations, had left many concerns unresolved amongst the general public.